like it's going to be pretty long, okay? So before I want to start by saying that as a baby lion, I don't want to be mauled by a master lion like you, okay? So I would like to ask you.
Oh, well, that takes all the sport out of it.
I know it does, but wait till I'm finished. Because I know you're going to maul me, but give me some time to clarify my statement and kind of make my argument.
All right.
However, if you want to ask any questions about what am I talking about or what do I mean, feel free to interrupt anytime.
Yes, okay, all right.
Okay, so let me see if I could start this. It's fairly long, be patient, okay? So since our last Skype conversation, I've had look at many of your videos, okay? I looked at quite a few, probably 10 or 20 videos, and you cover Anapanasati Sutra very well in many areas. And I also did some further research of other ajahns, etc. And here's the thing. I believe that a crucial element in the practice of the Anapanasati Sutra is missing, okay? That crucial element is
who is missing it? Let's define that audience also.
Okay. Pretty much everywhere that I've read or that I probably a Western Buddhist audience would be probably a better, Western Buddhist audience would probably be better. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure who's missing, but I'm missing it.
I would say that that's spot on. Congratulations. Yes, it is English language Buddhism or Western Buddhism that is missing several components.
Right.
And that some places in Asia, some components are missing in some places, and some places are complete. Okay. An example of what that would be.
That's why I came to you, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay, can I go on with that? Okay,
all right.
It's quite long, so you might want to be a little bit patient until I lay out all this stuff. Okay, so here's the crucial element that is missing is the common belief that the breath referred to Anapanasati is restricted to the movement of air in and out of the lungs, instead of viewing it as traditionally as the breath of life or life energy, prana or chi. Let me explain. As you know, Buddha was a master yogi. In yogic understanding, there are 5 bodies. There's the physical body, the breath body, the prana, the mind body, the intellect body, of which you are a true master, and the bliss body. I tell you, monks, that the in and out breath, is classed as a body among bodies. Okay, so it's common knowledge among yogis that the breath can be used to control the body, emotions, and mind. And in yoga, that would be called pranayama. In China, or whatever that we call qi or tai chi, other methods. I believe that at no point in the practice of Anapanasati Sutra does the mind or intellect factor into steps 1 through 8, possibly until steps 12. Okay, I know this is really weird. Okay, the exception is okay.
What you're talking, before you go into this last paragraph, let's go back to the paragraph before that, which was basically talking about, as it were, our phrase could be used as the breath of life.
Right.
That many people mistake how vitally important breathing is in so many aspects. So I often remind students that you've got a death sentence coming in 2 minutes. You can get a reprieve by taking a breath. But if you don't take this next breath, you're going to die right away.
Right.
The Buddha also talks about that. And in fact, I think the name of the sutta is the Mortality Sutta or something like that, where people will say, oh, if I could just spend 1 more year, or if I could just spend 1 more day. But one who is wise will say, this breath will do.
Right.
Right. So that's how kind of important all of this is. And the Asians keep pointing back at it with language or concepts. but there is actually something very real in there, and that the Buddha incorporated that into Anapanasati, and that in fact another way you just use the word pranayama. Anapana and pranayama are exactly the same word in two different languages backwards. Anapana and pranayama, those are the same words, and it has to do with either in and out or out and in. But it's basically, that's what anapana is the pana is the out breath and ana is the in breath. Okay. And it is life itself. That's the base. The Buddha says that right there in that phrase that you were saying, that it is the body among bodies, because
and it has the quality of life. And it has the qualities of life, which is happiness, health, and all those qualities.
Precisely so. That in fact, any way that a person feels will be expressed in the way that they're breathing. That's one of the reasons why excellent psychologists watch their clients while they're breathing, because it's actually that you have heard in English that the eyes are the doorway to the soul.
The breath is the doorway to...
The breath is the actual soul that we're talking about.
Yes, I agree with that, yes. Let me continue, because I have quite a bit more to say.
Okay, back up just a bit before you got into the numbers. Not go back to the beginning of the paragraph where you started, because we were talking about the stuff before that. But anyway, the point that I want to make is that I agree with you 100%. So far, so good, and that's one of the elements that is missing in Western Buddhism.
Right, and by the way, anything that I've seen of your videos, I haven't seen anything that disagrees with what I'm going to say today, by the way. So it's all complementary, so, okay, so I'll go back a little bit. I believe that in no point of the practice of the Ānāpānasati does the mind or intellect factor into steps 1 and 8, possibly until step 12. Okay, hold on. The exception is the directed thought and evaluation of the breath and breath energy, which is the main focus of this practice. Okay? Did you understand what I meant by that?
Yes, but it's not exactly correct. Let me add an additional point.
Okay.
And that is that's for the very, very beginner. And that as we progress in practice, we begin to take various objects. That's why the sutta is set up, is thus one trains oneself, which means
but
that
I'm
for a while, okay, but there's that point when we take the object of sukha itself.
Right.
That in fact, there's two different ways of doing that. The first is to take it as an object in order to train the mind in sukha by gladdening the mind and beginning to control one's own feelings so that we bring up sukha.
Right, that's going to
the
happen
first step.
I'm going to explain all that in how I do it.
Okay, all right.
Because I'm just getting at the beginning. Okay. So their only thoughts are directed thoughts and evaluation about what you're doing with the breath. You're always busy with the breath. So there should be very little thought, because almost all attention and awareness is focused on the work of using the pranic breath body to calm the body, emotions, and mind. If any hindrances occur, attention is always focused back onto the breath and the work at hand. Okay?
Precisely.
I'll keep on.
So what you mean by thought is discursive thought.
I don't actually know how to say these things, because I don't know what discursive thought is.
Okay, so that's what, let's straighten that out then. Okay, when you say thought, you're actually, in the reference that you're saying is discursive thought.
Not sure.
That means talking to oneself or verbal communications. There is another kind of thought. If somebody throws you a baseball and it's about 5 or 6 inches from your hand so that you can grab it like this, you don't have to tell yourself you should pick up that baseball, but you're able to have a kind of a thought that gets that action done. So what I'm introducing is there's a...
What's the second one, the baseball one? The catching, what's that called? The second thought.
That's an action kind of thought. but it
'Cause that's what
also
I'm,
is a kinesthetic kind of thought. And also observing the breath or observing the ball with the eyes was one kind of thought. Another kind of thought was an instant trajectory of where that ball is going to be sometime in the future, in the near future, so that the hand is there to catch it. All right. In fact, that catching the ball winds up having 5, 6, 7 thoughts, none of which were verbal.
That's the key point I don't understand there. Okay, so I don't know how to describe it, but a lot of it is not verbal. It's just, you're just focusing your attention. There should be really no verbal thoughts unless you're just reinforcing what's happening at the moment, is what I get.
So let us introduce a new term, and that is, how does one spend this mind moment and the next mind moment? And how do we begin to discern what is a mind moment and stop using the word thought and start using mind moments and how we spend them? Because sometimes a thought will take a whole bunch of mind moments. In fact, a sentence that I'm speaking takes quite a number of mind moments to put that together.
Right.
So if you think about it in mind moments, but I just wanted to point out about the issue of thought, you're meaning discursive thought, because while we're practicing watching the breath, we're not thinking much. And if we are thinking, then what we should do is to be in tune with the thinking, with what we're actually experiencing. The sense was, oh, this is a really nice breath, would be a thought, as we're actually experiencing the joy of the in-breath. And so we're experiencing.
I don't have those kind of thoughts. It's just focused on, it's like directed thoughts where you're not actually verbalizing, but you're directing
you're actually going to direct your mind. This is where step 10 of Anapanasati comes in.
What do you call directing your mind, but not actually verbalizing it?
Well, you do both. That in fact, the verbalizing is the way of the very, very beginner, is by using the verbalizations so that we can get the underlying tendencies to begin to shift, as well as the as well as the feelings.
Okay, but I think that's the crucial problem, is that as a beginner, if you're verbalizing these things, you're going to miss out on the experience of experiencing the breath.
This is why it is a training.
Right.
And you're asking as if the experience of the breath is the only thing that you've got to do.
I think you're so immersed.
It's almost like giving this example would be that you're trying to learn how to play whack-a-mole.
Right.
And one of the ways to do that is by having the young child focus on one mole. And if that mole comes up, you can whack it. And if that mole comes up, you can whack it. And you let the other 15 go.
Right, but this is not how I practice this way. It's more like you have to be aware of the whole.
Exactly so, as a process, as a skill development system.
Right.
And so we practice a little bit and get that good, and then we practice more, just like in music. The student has to practice scales, and he has to practice chords. Strumming or whatever that he's doing has to go through the rudimentaries. And so there are some rudimentaries that we have to practice to develop, and that the whole package winds up being all of the skills that we put together.
Right. But if you're playing the piano, you're immersed in it and you enjoy it, and there's not that much thoughts because you're focused and you're immersed in the action of trying to get right.
And when you're trying to get it right, you're busy and you're afraid of dukkha and you're not relaxed. This is what we, and listen, and just listen.
Right is not the right word.
Okay, please don't argue with me. Just listen to what I have to say. And that is that when the student is playing the piano like that, he's not comfortable. That's why the piano player doesn't want, when he's learning a piece, he doesn't even want his mom in the room. He wants to practice in private so that he can get it down correctly. And then when he goes on stage the first time, he's in great butterflies. He's not settled. But if he plays that same piece of music in public 1,000 times over the course of 5 or 6 years, the next time he plays it, he's actually playing it and he can enjoy it because he really knows it. He's got it by heart. But this is a process. Okay. And so the process is that we have to develop various of these skills that are mentioned in the Anapanasati. And Bhikkhu Buddhadasa points this out, that in the beginning of the practice, we have to kind of play around with it and get some skills going. But after a while, then we start honing in on one skill and we get that one really going. And then we hone in on another skill and we get that one really going. And then we hone in on the skills of getting the package together.
Right.
Okay. This is the way. So there is more to be done. And that one of the important points, that the way that I've just described it was the point about the gladdening of the mind, because this is exactly the way that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about it. And way over on page 216 or 18 of the book is where he says this is the first thing that's got to be done.
I respectfully disagree. Okay.
All right. Now, if you cannot follow, all right, first off, let's drop down just a little bit and go back to the whole point of practicing Anapanasati is for the fulfillment of other things, including turning the Eightfold Noble Path, which is the basis of Anapanasati, into the 7 factors of enlightenment, which is the fulfillment of the Eightfold Noble Path. And Anapanasati is the practice or the process that we go through that. So if we stay back with sati and investigation and right effort, then that will develop samma sankappa, or right attitude, or the bending of the mind. All right. But before we do that, the right effort is to be able to control the breath, to control the mind and the thoughts, learning to control the feelings, and eventually we get down to our expectations or our basic way of looking at life, that we can actually use the term attitude.
Right.
All right. And this is part of the Eightfold Noble Path of learning to change our attitude. And so this attitude change is the attitude of, I can do this. I can gather these factors together. And so this is the kind of way that we're looking at it from the beginning, is that the changing of the mind from an unwholesome thought into a wholesome thought in Sutta number 117 is exactly the gladdening of the mind in Sutta number 118, and also in number 19, the 2 kinds of thoughts, wholesome and unwholesome. So we have to have the wholesome thoughts, whatever the kind of thought it is, and it could be a discursive thought. And those are the ones that we're going to focus in on in the beginning, because those are the ones that we can best control. Is the discursive thoughts would be gladdening the mind, which would be like, oh, I'm glad that I remembered to breathe. I'm glad that it's okay to take a deep breath.
Okay.
All right. And so we take that gladness and we put it onto the breathing.
Right.
And so
I don't disagree with you on that. Can I kind of finish? My point is
okay.
rather long. Okay. I'm going to start actually with step 1, which is Buddha Sada.
Well, all of this is back to the point that you said that you disagreed with me.
No, I didn't disagree with you. I disagree that gladdening, which is 9 in the Buddhist and in Anapanasati, should be 1. I think it fits perfectly there. I agree with gladdening the mind.
I don't understand what you said.
No, I only respectfully disagree that step 9 should be brought at the beginning. I think it belongs where it is as step 9.
There's no, there is step 9 on every phase of the whole thing.
That's true also. That's true also. I agree with that statement. Let me continue. Maybe you'll understand where I'm getting at. And then you can tear me apart all you want. Okay.
Actually, to be really, really honest with you, I don't really care about where you're trying to go with this article that you've written.
No, I'm just trying to, I'm like, for some reason, I have this in my mind that this is the right way. And
I know, and I'm
Yeah.
hoping some way that I can get you to drop that attitude.
Right, but you got to give me some
Because
better
the attitude that you've got with it is, James, is this is going to be a really, really long, slow process. And here's a way of thinking about it. Now, wait
I
a
don't
minute.
think that.
Please listen.
Yeah.
Please listen.
Okay, sorry.
There are two ways of doing it. One is taking what I have to say and try to plug it into what you already believe. There is another way,
Right.
more difficult, but the another way is to take what I have to say,
Right.
listen to it, understand it, put it together. And then the other parts that you have, you can fill in the gaps that way.
Right.
In other words, after you understand what I'm saying, you can say, oh, yeah, that's because it agrees with this, it agrees with that, and that kind of thing. This is actually the easier way for both of us.
It is probably for you. But okay, but what you just said now is very relevant because yes, I'm taking unless you change my mind, I'm taking the first one, which is I'm taking your great wisdom, which I can really apply to what I'm doing, and it's really helpful, okay? Because the way I'm doing is very easy for me, right? And the second way seems very hard because I've already tried it. I've already evaluated all your videos, okay? Or some of your videos, okay? But let me continue. I haven't even made my point yet. So if I could finally make my point, maybe I'll understand where I'm coming from.
Actually, I understand a whole lot about where you're coming from without you reading that article.
Okay.
The words in the article are kind of irrelevant.
Okay. Okay, so now what?
Well, the question is that do you want to be able to set aside all of the stuff that you've got and listen to it in a fresh way?
I have, and that's why I've been here, and that's why I've listened to many, many of your videos.
Okay, all right. So, let us say it this way then. Let's go right to the bottom line of the argument or the perspective, or another way of saying it is that what's the most important question on your mind? And let's go from that perspective. What you got on your mind, other than proving that you've got a long article written?
That's a good point. Okay, that's a good point. As far as I'm concerned, all I'm trying to do is I'm learning, but unless I put these things into practice, I get real insight by myself. It's all useless information. Okay, so I'm trying to be aligned here and get down, ferret out the details, get down deep in there, find out what the real truth is. Okay, my practice has told me that this is the truth.
All right.
And and as I don't know what to say.
I would rather you smile than talk.
Okay. Sorry. I get a little bit serious. There's no doubt about that one.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, this is the way that I work is that I try to get people to notice what they're doing right in this very moment.
Right.
And so that's why I say I would rather you smile than talk. And I would like it if you could settle down and take a deep breath.
Thank you.
And let's do some of that Anapanasati right now together.
Okay.
And as we are just sitting and doing some ānāpānasati, we can talk about it too. So just relaxing and taking the deep breath and saying everything is okay and everything is fine. And that's gladdening the mind. Allow the shoulders to relax. Notice any other tensions in the body and say, wow, I could just relax. Great to relax. You know, taking that breath is like being alive. It's one of the values of taking deep breaths and letting it out. We can just relax and relax. But it also allows us to energize the body and let the body become tingly alive and alert because of our breathing. So the breathing actually affects the way that we feel immediately. Just allowing it to feel good. Just taking a good deep breath and say, wow, this feels so good. And in this relaxed state, we can see that really there's no place to go, nothing to do. No words, no flow. No right way to do it. Just relax. And as we sit and relax, we recognize it all. By relaxing the shoulders and relaxing the body, that helps us relax the mind and begin to slow down. So the mind relaxes and the feelings relax. We begin to feel safe. And everything is just okay. Feel safe, secure. Nothing's attacking at all. All of the things that could be attacking, that bucket is empty right now. There's no danger. Feels good to feel safe. Feels comfortable to feel safe. And as we feel safe and comfortable, we begin to also feel satisfied that this is good enough right now. Don't need anything special. Don't need to even understand that, all right, everything is okay right now. And I'm satisfied. Learning to bring that satisfaction is sukha. And it's a skill to be developed just this way. We literally talk ourselves into it. And wow, it feels nice to be satisfied. And as we know that we can get ourselves into this, we recognize that, oh, I can do this again. I can come back and feel satisfied again and again. Wow, I know how to be satisfied. Oh, what a relief it is to know that satisfaction is just around the corner. And then we begin to get the attitude, I can do this. I can feel satisfied. I can handle anything when I'm satisfied. And so now we're practicing both Anapanasati and the Eightfold Noble Path together. Remembering to take a breath, remembering to gladden the mind, taking the effort to gladden the mind, settle ourselves down, and develop sukha and piti with minds that is wholesome, thoughts not full of hindrances. So, what do you think? Don't
I
lose it.
think,
Don't lose this. Take it.
I think that you went through the way of the mind and I went through the way of the breath.
Well, I could breathe all over you, but I can't do that.
Because I don't use any mental processes. By just breathing properly, I get calm.
All
I don't need
right.
to actually say anything to myself.
Okay. Until you do.
I don't because I'm so busy in the breath that I hardly ever have thoughts.
Right
If
now,
I'm not,
now you're talking.
I mean, in normal, but obviously I'm not well practiced. I'm good in a meditative mode.
Here's the point. Is that it's important to learn how to develop wholesome thoughts rather than trying to drop them all together. And when you learn to control the thoughts, then you begin to see them more clearly rather than just getting rid of them, because when they come back with a vengeance. It's better to learn to control them.
I
And
don't
how do
have.
you control them? In a way, you have to control the mind in order to control the breathing anyway, if you're controlling the breathing.
I'm probably not using the right terms. Yeah. I mean, I might want to say more like what do you call it, hindrance thoughts, or because if I am in a peaceful place, okay, because obviously if I'm like right now, I'm very excited, or if I have like a problem in life, then that's going to obviously affect my peacefulness, right? But if I am in a very peaceful place, normally when I do the meditation, it's just a matter of focusing on the breath sensations, expanding those sensations throughout the body. PT naturally develops everywhere. When there's PT, you bathe in the PT. The PT becomes
Okay.
sukha, right? And it just
All
naturally
right.
flows.
All right. That's not the issue. I give you credit for all of that, by the way. Congratulations. You're doing some things right.
Probably the only thing. Okay, so
All right. So I'm giving you credit for that. There's no problem with that. But let me ask you this kind of question, and that is that you already said that there are times when you're really agitated. There are times when your shoulders are up. There are times when you're on guard. All right.
like right now,
All right. So then, how do you get yourself back into that meditative state?
I usually use the breath meditation, which is I breathe in. I start by first breathing as
When
best
do
I
you
can, which
do
is
that? When you're agitated?
if I'm very agitated, it's going to take me a while to get back there.
All right, so let's work on that then as a skill to be developed. Basically, how you would do that is by talking yourself into it or remembering that, hey, I know that I can get myself back into that state. And now you've just had a wholesome thought. You've just had a gladdening of the mind kind of thought. You're having these gladdening of the mind kind of thoughts, and you're not giving yourself credit for them because you're too focused on, I've got to do it one way, rather than recognizing that you're doing it in all of the right ways already a little bit.
Right.
And that eventually we take each one of these steps of Anapanasati and really focus in on that one and make it a skill. But in the beginning, we have to use all of them. And so you have been using the mind to gladden the mind. Now let's start paying attention to the fact that you're already doing that, and let's focus on more of it so that you intentionally do things. Like right now, gladden it. Let me see you do that. Okay, all right, now I'm getting it. Yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to focus in on doing some of these other things. And the important thing here is this issue that, in fact, it's when you were talking about in the beginning, talking about what Western Buddhism is missing would be the body of the breath. Also, the Western meditation, Western Buddhism whole system misses out on this idea of gladdening the mind intentionally, which is in so many suttas. It's unbelievable how this big, big issue is so strongly missed by Westerners. And here you are having direct resistance against it.
I don't have a resistance, but it's not the resistance I have. Following Buddha dasas and the sutta, I'm thinking that gladdening of the mind is done after you breathe it, then after you calm your emotions. Because how do you define the mind? Because the mind,
You're only doing it in one context.
yeah,
Okay, that's like saying, this is exactly the way that I hold and play the violin when I'm laying in bed.
right,
But when I'm on stage, I'm not going to hold the violin like that. I'm going to hold it differently.
right, okay,
Okay, the context makes it different. And the question is, how can you develop the skill of gladdening the mind
right.
if you don't practice the skill of gladdening the mind, so that when you need to gladden the mind the most, you can't do it?
Right.
You'll stay agitated.
I was practicing the other skills first because of the progression in the sutta.
Precisely so. And I would like for you to be introduced to the fact that that's not the correct way. That is the way that is called the organized method.
Yeah.
It's taught organized, but it's practiced naturally.
Okay. Okay.
But I touched on this last time when
No,
we
I think
talked.
we never finished it though. I never got the complete picture of what gets practiced first, later, or.
All right. Well, guess what? We're not even going to be able to finish all of that in this conversation either.
Okay. But I'm trying to get that.
But I know you're kind of in a hurry,
No, no hurry, no
and
hurry.
and that a better way of looking at it is that let's practice right from the beginning and all along. Let's practice these things of ānāpānasati in our conversation while we're discussing them. In other words, if we're actually having a conversation about ānāpānasati and can't even practice it then, how could we hope to be able to practice ānāpānasati while we're in the bank or in the immigration office or in handcuffs?
Great.
This is where the gladdening of the mind quality comes in, is that yes, it's needed right from the very beginning, but it's also needed to be developed as a skill. Have you seen the movie The Life of Brian?
I might have, but I don't remember it.
Monty Python movie has the song "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life."
Right.
Okay, you hear? All right. Well, that actually is an attitude. And that part of the practice of ānāpānasati is to change our attitude about life.
Great.
Mm-hmm. And so this is actually, that attitude is the Pali word sankappa, that is translated as either right thought or right intention. but you could say that actually it's a little bit deeper than thought, because the attitude that you have determines the thoughts that you have.
Exactly.
Well, that means that if we're intentionally having thoughts, never mind what our attitude is, right now we're intentionally having thoughts of gladdening the mind, and that begins to have the intentions or the samma, sankappa, or the underlying attitude. Or one student recently used the word expectations, that on the in-breath, he's okay, but at the top of the in-breath, we chased it down to that, but specifically on the out-breath, he feels fear. And then it came that there was the expectation that something could go wrong. And then the fear comes because of that expectation. Well, the expectation is what we're talking about, or that attitude is what we're actually working on changing, is the attitude that everything is okay. The attitude of, I've got this wired. The attitude of, hot dog, this is marvelous. The attitude of what? That dukkha missed me. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune do not dent the armor because I've got no armor. But it don't hit because I got out of the way. The eye is moving so fast that I get dodged. Or we play dodgeball with all of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune with the right attitude. Okay, and so it's this attitude that we're developing, and we do that with the feelings of sukha and piti. And when sukha and piti are there, then that means that we're developing the attitude, so that in Sutta number 48, there is a statement that talks about hindrances, referring to them as hindrances, and also using the word that is translated as obstructions. And you can see that hindrances and obstructions are the same. And then the statement is made that when the student knows for sure, without a doubt, that no matter how obstructed or hindered this situation or the mind is in this moment, we can clean all of that out, come back to the reality of the moment, see things how they actually are. No matter what happens, I can handle it. This is, in fact, now called the first knowledge. The first knowledge on the path. The first knowledge of the path, because this knowledge is on the path, it is noble, it is supramundane, and this is an attitude that is not held by ordinary people. This understanding that it does not matter what happens, I can handle it. Okay? Like as a teacher, it does not matter what is said about me on the internet. I can handle that.
Okay, go along with that.
Okay, so that's just an example. It doesn't matter what happens. Doesn't matter how many police there are surrounding this house with their bullhorns blazing. I can handle that.
Is that equanimity?
Well, no, it's an attitude. The
Okay.
equanimity eventually comes by as a byproduct of this attitude.
Right.
Equanimity, actually, you could say that piti is the big one, sukha is the satisfactory one, and upekkha is even complete satisfaction of nothing.
Right.
Okay, so that's his way of looking at it. Upekkha is, but then how do we develop the sankappa? Is by developing the piti and the sukha. And how we develop the piti and the sukha is by gladdening the mind. And how we gladden the mind is by changing unwholesome thoughts or hindrances into wholesome thoughts.
That's the problem I have right now. I don't agree with that.
Pardon?
I have a problem because I don't agree with that.
What sutta would you like to read that would give that?
118.
Okay, well, how about reading 117?
No, we're
Also,
on 118.
Pardon?
We're on 118 right now.
No, we are actually going more than likely we're still on 117 because 117 is where we learn how to practice ānāpānasati.
Right. What I was trying to say is that by just breathing properly, you can gladden your mind.
That's not the only way
I
to do
agree.
it.
I agree fully.
Okay.
I agree. And this is the crust here that we're talking about today, is that there's a mind method and there's a breath, soul, breath method. And this is where I'm coming from. It's very hard for me to express it, but there's no need to actually gladden your mind with words. You can just use the breath energy.
And so long as you go that way, that means when when things are tense, the hindrances will still be there. That you have to find a way of fixing the hindrances.
That's the steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is calming your body fabrications, right? Your mind fabrications, your mind. And that's how you do that with breath energy.
Yes, I understand that. And I also understand that that's actually more Hindu than it is in the Buddhist method.
It could be. It probably is. And maybe all this may just be Ajahn Lee and Buddha Dasa going to India, learning some of that and introducing it, and that it was never in the Buddhist Anapanasati. And I'm just going
Actually,
from
no,
Ajahn.
what I'm saying is different than that is the part that you're missing, and that is the changing of the mind intentionally from unwholesome thoughts to wholesome thoughts, which is referred to also as gladdening the mind.
Right. I would say that in the way you say it, I completely agree because you're actually alive. You bring Buddhist teachings to life, to right here and now. And here I am stuck in, I'm trying to do the Anapanasati Sutra correctly in a sitting meditation, right?
Right.
Which is, I agree with you fully that no, I should be doing this in everyday life.
Well, what's
Does
the
that make
point
sense?
of doing the meditation off in the corner? What's the point?
Because that sutra says the monk goes into some isolated place and and just sits down. That's why, and here you are, and I really appreciate it. You're actually a very live. You bring life to the teachings.
Okay. Well, here's something quite interesting about that then. And that is that and you may be the first student I've had that answers the question differently than most. And that is, and that if you answer yes to this question, I can arrange accommodations for you. But the question is, do you want to sit on the floor in front of some Buddha Rupa or some Ashton idol 14 to 16, maybe 20 hours a day for the next 18 years, day after day, and only getting up to go to the toilet, or
No,
perhaps for a few years you'll lay down on the floor in the meditation hall, but then you'll learn to sit up 24 hours a day. Do you want to live that life?
let me answer that. Okay, this is how I do it. Actually, I do most of my practice walking, doing yoga. In other words, I actually do the Anapanasati practice doing yoga poses. Okay, so each pose, I actually go through all the breathing fully, the body, get the electric energy all over, trying to get sukha and all that kind of stuff. Breathe properly.
Okay, all right. Let us just change that you don't leave that meditation hall, but you can walk, you can sit down, you can lie down, you can jump up and down, you can stand, whatever like that. We're not talking about poses right now. I'm talking about, do you want a life of meditation and nothing else?
No, obviously not.
Well, I already know that
Of course you do.
because
Of course you do.
because because if you had said yes to that question, you'd be talking to me right here on the porch, not across
Right.
Skype.
And I may be, by the way, I might be going there. Are you in Koh Samui?
Actually, from many places on this island, Koh Samui can be seen.
Okay.
It's about 20 kilometers from here.
Very nice. I wouldn't want to impose myself on you with my
You couldn't possibly.
okay. No, but I agree with you, and I agree with you fully that I need to put this into more difficult practices, especially when you're talking to people and all that. But I'm nowhere, I'm a beginner. I'm just trying to, like you said, you have to, develop the skills. I agree with everything you say. There's nothing that you've said that doesn't, doesn't come into
Okay.
factor.
All right. Well, let us continue then from that perspective that this is the missing piece for Western Buddhism. Actually, we've nailed down two pieces that are absolutely essential pieces, and Western Buddhism is missing them both. One is the importance of the breath, which you and I are spot on about. That not is the breath just important philosophically, but it is important for the next 5 minutes for a matter of life or death. Also, it is life-giving, and that many things depend upon that, and that the Buddha also, I think that we can agree that the Buddha talks about it in the sense that we have to control the breathing, that it's a long breath, not just any old breath will do, but actually that to be even to get into the breath, it has to be somewhat controlled, that it's conscious, that
I
if
would go
it's
much more further than that. I would say that your whole energy and all your attention is on developing all the factors of the breath.
okay, all right, so you agree with that. That's
Yes.
the part that's missing in Western Buddhism. That's the point that we're making, is that you and I are on the same page of the importance of the breath and learning to control the breath and being there with the breath, and all of that is completely missing in the Western version of Mahasi Sayadaw, where they say, or the Goenka method, just watch the breath or just note the breath, but not actually learn to control the breath. Okay, so the next point.
And the breath energy, which is very important. The what do you call
Yes,
it? The
okay,
PT. The
okay.
PT.
We
Yeah.
just talked about that in the sense of energizing the body
Right.
or making the body tingly alive
No,
or
but you can move
developing.
the sensations, right? You can actually
Now, by
move
the
the PT.
way, here's a point
Yeah.
that we can develop also, and that is that when you use the word piti, it is often described as physical, but the actual reality is mental. Just like sukha is mental.
I don't know.
Well, I'm telling you so that you can figure it out rather
Yeah.
than automatically disagreeing because it's something that you haven't heard before. I'm adding something new for you
Right.
to
Right.
just take in and look at and
I thought PT
experience for
was.
yourself.
I thought that PT was actually the chi, the prana.
Well, let's not get magical in our thinking and let's look at realities for a moment.
It's my reality.
Well, here's the point is that the language that we use can be ordinary real language without adding words that are almost always magically understood.
Right.
Now, let's
Yeah.
go back to the point that and give this example that at a football game, let us say even a world champion or a Super Bowl or something like that, that the event happens that everybody that went there for, some of them up and down, but the touchdown is made. What does the guy who made the touchdown, that football player, what does he do immediately after? All right, you got it.
Exhilaration.
The
Exhilaration.
exhilaration. that was
Right.
attitude, but it also had a lot of other stuff in it. And you can believe me that while he's running down the field, he's doing some heavy breathing. Okay. Now, here's the point about that. That moment is the piti, the exhilaration, the whim, the pumping, and it's
Yes.
an attitude. It's mental as well as physical.
Okay. Okay. I'll leave that. I'll accept that.
All
I'll
right.
accept that.
There we go. There we
Yeah.
go. I got one.
Okay.
Let's put that one in. If we understand that, then that means that we can work with it. By the way, you and I just had it. That was the piti.
Yeah, I did. No, I've been having it because of the way I've been breathing just now, breathing everywhere in my body through all my pores.
Okay. Well, just letting you know
Yeah.
that we're watching what's going on, that was a moment of pity. All right. That win. We've got it. And that's the whole idea is that when we develop the attitude of winning,
Yeah.
then that piti comes on much easier than if you have to bring it only from the body.
Right.
That we use the mind. And here's the other point, which is a very important point. How could you possibly control the breath without the mind? Let us say you were dead or asleep or something like that.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
when you're controlling the breath, you're actually controlling the mind to control the breath.
Right.
If you're going to control the mind to control the breath, you can also use the mind to control the piti as well.
Right. Right.
And if you can use the mind to control the breath, then we can use the mind to learn to control the thoughts that we have so that we can gladden the mind. And this will also help with the sukha and with the piti. So this winds up being a combination deal here of the
Right.
mind, the body, and the feelings.
Right.
And the mind is the key because the mind is the forerunner for everything.
Right.
Okay, so the mind is the forerunner, which means sati. We have to wake up and remember, and then look at what's going on. And this is the mind. And then the next part is that we have to then gladden the mind or begin to remember, oh, I'm going to breathe. This is part of the gladdening of the mind, is remembering to do that.
But it's such an automatic process that I'm immersed in the.
So this is why I'm asking you to stop having it done automatically and start looking at the mechanisms to see what's going on.
No, but I mean, it was, as you said,
You don't
when
want
I
to hear about
first.
it. Let me say it again.
No, 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 I
So
heard it, but I was just
let
going to
it
say, I did
in.
that at the beginning. At the beginning, I did that.
Well, can you do that while you're getting arrested? Can you do
No,
that while
no,
they're
no, no,
hauling you into the
no,
emergency room?
no.
Okay. Well, let's work on how to develop those skills is by recognizing that we have to learn to control the mind.
Right.
And that the easy way to do that is by changing the kind of thought we have from a regular, ordinary, unwholesome thought into a wholesome thought.
Right.
And the Buddha is really tough on that. I can name you so many suttas that this is in.
I completely agree. I understand where you're coming from here. I'm just stuck in the how to do this sutra. That's why. That's why I have so many weird comments, right? And if you understand where I'm coming from, instead of here and now, day to day, we're at the hospital and we really need to get a wholesome thought, right? My
Mhm.
mind is right now focused on how do I, at the very basic, develop the starting skills, right?
Well, have a
Of
wholesome thought right now. Have a wholesome thought right now. Everything is good enough right now.
it is,
You
it
have to
is.
practice that.
I have ever since that
Wait
I.
a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. We're not.
I am, I
When?
am.
All right, okay, all right. Let's stay with the present moment,
Right.
not the past. This is the way that we practice every time we remember, is to remember that you don't have to think about what you were thinking about.
Right.
You can think about what you want to think about, and what you want to think about actually is ānāpānasati.
Right.
Recognize that you have that change of mind. And you're changing it from an unwholesome, whatever it was that you were doing, into remembering that you're going to practice ānāpānasati. And that's a wholesome thought right there.
Right. I
So
was just
let's
trying to
start.
justify myself, and that's what this whole unwholesome thought was.
Oh, I've got to write that email. The boss is really hot right now. Oh, never mind. Oh, I'd rather practice ānāpānasati. That's the change from worried about the email and the boss and all the problems of life into right now I don't have to do that. Right now I can just sit and enjoy. Those are the thoughts that we begin to change. We begin to gladden the mind. Okay. And so sutta number 19, there's a story. And the story is about the cow herd. Now, this is not this is not rawhide. This is not drovers with thousands of cows. This is an old Indian, and he's got 4, 5, 8, 10, whatever like that. And he's got to get them out of his house along the path that is a village. And he's got to get these cows through the village. And so what he does is he walks right in the middle of them and watching them around. And if any one of those cows tries to get a carrot or get an apple or tries to step on a child or runs into the laundry, he's going to whack them, right? And as he keeps whacking these cows to get them in line, he gets his way through the village so he can take them to the feeding ground where there's stalks and stubble and things like that. And now the cows have their head down and they're grazing. Now the cow herd doesn't have to stand there whacking his cows with a stick. Now the cow herd can go sit under a tree, but he's still going to keep one eye on these cows to make sure that they're grazing, rather than one looks up and says, "Oh, I like something way over yonder," and heads off. No, the cow herd needs to watch that. Okay. So this is in the sutta where the Buddha first off talks about what is a wholesome thought and what is an unwholesome thought. And then he reckons about the cows trying to get the groceries. That's an unwholesome thought. And the cow herd whacks that cow with a stick. Or as one student thought about it was the rawhide. He's cracking the whip. In another sutta, it talks about the Buddha saying the phrase "Aha, I see you, Mara."
Right.
Okay, and that's the crack of the stick. After the cows are now in order and going down the path, he still needs to keep them on the path. But once they get to the grazing ground, now he can relax. All right, but.
Okay.
The grazing then is the cows having one wholesome chew or cud after another, one wholesome after another, and not having unwholesome thoughts. And that the cow herd going under the tree represents that now that we have one wholesome thought after another, we can begin to put gaps in there.
Right.
The other way of doing it is that whatever thoughts we're having, we're putting gaps in there.
I understand both of those. Yeah.
Which means then that the next thought that does come up is likely to be an unwholesome thought because the last thought you did have was an unwholesome thought. But if we train the mind to have one wholesome thought after another wholesome thought after another wholesome thought, then when we go into that gap where there is no thoughts, then the likelihood of the next thought that we have, because we've been training the mind, is now going to be a wholesome thought. So this is the representative of the cow herd going and sitting under the tree is the same as the second jhana, which we're focused on how good we feel. We're relaxed, rather than keeping an eye on strongly and whacking those cows. So one's right effort is that stick, and that is to change that unwholesome thought to a wholesome thought. And that's also in Sutta number 117, one's right effort to change that thought from an unwholesome thought to a wholesome thought. This is also in Sutta number 39, where the Buddha is talking about the hindrances and giving 5 examples of hindrances and how we're freed with them. And I'll give a great detail, but one of them is getting out of prison. That when we're in hindrance, we're in prison. All right, paying off our debts, because when we want things, that means we owe a debt to that thing to get it. But when we don't have any wants or anything, then we don't own anything, which means we don't have any debts to pay. Another one would be when we're having thoughts of unwholesome, that's the same as having a mind that's sick. And so when we finish with the hindrances, that means that our mind is now like getting out of the hospital. Boy, don't you feel good? I mean, checking out of the hospital feels a whole lot better than checking into one. Okay, that's where we're coming from with this, is that we got to rid of the mind of those hindrances. And the way to do that is not by cutting out all thoughts or discursive thoughts and then have only the thoughts of watching, but we actually begin to intentionally change the discursive thoughts from unwholesome thoughts to wholesome thoughts.
Right.
All right, and then I've already mentioned Sutta number 48, where the Buddha is talking about that when we have these instructions, obstructions removed, then that begins to build that confidence of, I can do this.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay, I understood what you said now. I'm just wondering if a further goal is to slow down the thoughts to only the very useful, wholesome thoughts, because some thoughts are, they're not unwholesome.
Eventually, the answer
Right.
to that is eventually,
Okay.
but not making that as the goal, but rather just the outcome of starting to look at whatever thought you're having throughout the day and
Right.
recognizing that you have a choice and you can think the kind of thoughts you want to think rather than the kind of thoughts that just randomly happen.
Right.
In other words, instead of the cow herd just letting the cows go all over the village doing whatever damage they can, he's going to
Right.
keep those thoughts in line.
Right. And I understand that. I've been practicing that already, but obviously now that you've taught me quite a few things, about gladdening the mind right away, introducing, wholesome thoughts right away in daily life we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are the 2 points that Western Buddhism is missing
Right.
big time, is the value of the breath and the value of controlling the mind to make the thoughts wholesome.
Wholesome, and then eventually have only the thoughts that are really useful for the Dhamma path.
Well, if you
Is
get
that correct?
deep into it, yes, but then you're not going to leave the meditation hall.
No, I'm talking about in everyday life, or at least this is an ideal, but in other words, so you're actually living a wholesome life. You're happy.
All right. So an example of that would be driving a car. I don't drive much.
Right.
In fact, I think I've driven like one time, which was only a block from here, to go pick up a student who was lost.
Right.
In 2 years.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So that would be an example of it, because it is extremely difficult to drive a car and not have low-class ordinary thoughts dealing with low-class ordinary other drivers.
Stress. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So you can find ways of isolating yourself so that you can maintain wholesome thoughts.
I do.
Okay.
That's my whole life, is making things simple, get rid of everything that's unwholesome.
All right. Well, if that's the case, then this teaching that we've had today is, there's nothing to it for you.
No. This is a practice, right? This is a practice. So it's not I'm just a beginner. So it's just a practice of, I've done concrete steps of getting a lot of stuff out. It's a process. I still have, a lot of things. There's more and more to get rid of.
Here's another way of looking at it is that if there is rubbish, that rubbish will eventually just rot and go into the ground all by itself.
Right.
But wouldn't it be a whole lot more fun if we stayed in the kitchen instead of just letting all the garbage that was there pile up? That we actually cleaned the room out.
Right.
Okay. This is what we mean by then cleaning out the mind means cleaning out the unwholesome thoughts.
Right. Right.
And so paying attention to this cleaning process, that we're going to actually stop thinking about things that are not useful, valuable, and wholesome, and start thinking about things right now that are useful, valuable, and wholesome. Like taking in the next breath. I mean, that's really a valuable thing to do. It'll keep you alive.
I understand now that I was under the mistaken impression that I had to master the first 12 steps before I could even go into that area of what you're so good at.
Okay, no, you don't have to master anything
other
than sukha. That's the only thing that you have to master. Why is the sukha so important for mastery? Is because that's what the Buddha teaches.
Right.
Dukkha and the end of dukkha requires satisfaction in order to be not dissatisfied.
So is it unhelpful to, for example, what is the mind? Okay, and there's 5 bodies that I mentioned earlier. You have the mind, body, and the intellect. You're using the intellect to condition the mind.
Well, I don't have to use the word intellect. I can just use the mind, conditioning the mind.
Right, right. Yeah.
I use the intellect for operating the PC.
Okay, I mean, these definitions are pretty hard to, I mean, how would you do number 9, okay, which is being aware of the mind? Is this a simple of hey,
well,
my mind,
paying attention to what you're thinking, paying attention to what you're looking at, paying attention to what the mind is doing.
Okay, yeah.
For instance, if you're twiddling your thumbs, do you know that you're twiddling your thumbs? If so, what part of the mind is twiddling the thumbs? Because the thumbs are not twiddling by themselves.
Right, right, right. Okay, stop looking at it as a practice, but use it in everyday life.
Well,
I mean,
that's all you've got. I mean, instead of looking at it philosophically, look at it as this is what is. This is it.
Right, okay. Okay. And what is concept or number 11, concentrating the mind, or whatever that is supposed to be?
Well, actually, that's a bad translation. The Pali is using the word samadhi.
Right.
And the word samadhi was a well-known, well-understood word in the time of the Buddha. But by the time the I.B. Honer and Riles Davies and all got a hold of it, it was a dead language, and they had to try to figure it out. And so they came up with the definition of samadhi as concentration, and they missed the point almost completely.
Right.
If anything, samadhi is exactly backwards from concentration. Okay, what does samadhi actually mean? It means one place in Sutta number 117, it talks about that right area samadhi or samma area samadhi is right unification and organization of the mind. When the mind becomes whole and unified. The word is also used as samadhi for first jhana because all of the factors that are needed are there unified. Number 1, lack of hindrances. Number 2, piti. 3, sukha. Number 4, applied mind. What are you applying it to? Wholesome thoughts. And sustained mind. What are you sustaining? Wholesome thoughts. And when you put all those things together as samadhi, you have not only the first jhana, but you have the mind organized and unified and fit for work. This is how we use the word samadhi. So the step number 11 would be, I'm not sure which is 10 and which is 11 because they go together, because the organization of the mind is the same as the freeing up of the mind.
Oh, 11 is concentrating mind, 12 is releasing.
Okay, well,
So
then
11 we're talking about. Yeah.
Right. Well, 11 and 12 are the same thing, though. The
Okay.
freeing
Okay.
of the mind or the liberation of the mind is the same thing as stopping the battle between the various parts of the mind and letting the mind be unified and organized.
Right.
Okay. And
And
the
what's the
way
difference
that
between
we
that
learn,
and 6? What's the difference
pardon?
between that and 6? What's the difference between 11 and 12 and 6 when you're developing, when you're bathing in the sukha?
Well, I don't know who gave you the word bathing.
Okay, let me see if I can read that. Hold on for a second.
Don't bother. I don't.
Yeah.
Let us look at instead the way that it actually is said as that. First off, understand sukha is exactly the opposite of dukkha.
Right.
Not only is it true in the Pali, but to prove that it's true, it's the same in the Thai language because they've incorporated dukkha and sukha over hundreds of years, and also in the Gujarati language, it's Duki and Suki. And so the various languages have this pair, which means if we're actually practicing sukha, we're practicing satisfaction, or we're actually practicing being not dissatisfied. We're not in dukkha.
Right.
And so we have to practice that as a skill. It's not a blissful place, it's a satisfactory place. Just a place, and the attitude, Dan, of I can do this anytime I want to is also the quality of yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay. We've got it now. That's the piti, and that's the mental part of the piti. But as you see, when I describe it, I got to use my hands. It's also part of the physical body. It's part of the breathing. And so the piti is just not body alone. It is mind and body and feeling, but it
And
is
sukha also?
control. Mind, body, and feeling, all of them have the quality. In fact, if you're not comfortable, if the body is uncomfortable, how can you be satisfied?
Right.
That makes no sense at all. And yet you see people practicing ānāpāna meditation or other kinds of meditation and doing it for a long time, and the body becomes uncomfortable.
Right.
Well, Anapanasati is a practice for getting the body comfortable, not uncomfortable.
I
So
agree.
that's the whole point, though, that's Western meditation is that they are looking at it from the wrong angle. The whole point is getting the mind into a state of sukha. How do we do that? Is by changing our thoughts from an unwholesome thought to a wholesome thought, and then we change our feelings slowly but easily enough, soon enough. We change our feelings from unwholesome feelings of fear, doubt, guilt, anxiety, depression, you name them, into the wholesome thoughts of feeling safe, secure, comfortable, satisfied.
Can I just do that by breathing also?
Yes. And then what are you going to do when you need to have wholesome thoughts?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. So you're looking at it only from sitting on the floor, and we've already determined you're not going to be sitting on the floor all the time.
No, but I mean, in everyday life, I can breathe to relax also and get that piti and some sukha. But yeah, if I am in what do you call it, agitated mode, obviously I'm not going to get into that piti and sukha.
Not with one or two breaths, but if you've developed the skill of wholesome thoughts, then you can get into that state within one or two breaths.
Okay. Okay, that's a good point.
Took me an hour and 20 minutes to make a point.
You've made it before many times. You've made it many times. It's just some of us are, we're just different. Yeah. Sometimes we just need somebody to.
No, basically what we can say is sometimes people are stuck on what they already know,
Right.
and then it's really hard to let something new in.
Yeah, in this case, yes, correct.
Mhm. No, that's true in every case with every student.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
why I
just
have to
probably
keep poking at it from all different directions.
right. Yeah, when you think about it, you're right. I mean, why am I being stuck on the format or the way it's supposed to flow? Just work on here and now, and and
and
that's the
and
most
and
important
do
thing.
and dukkha dukkha nirodha, which is the
Yeah,
teaching of the Buddha,
which is
which means
the most
then
important thing after all.
get yourself into a state of satisfaction, which
Right.
is the right organization of the mind, which is
Yeah,
also freedom.
yeah, it
What
is.
what are you freed from? You're freed from the hindrances because you know
From
how
your
to
own
control your own mind.
Okay, I think that does it. There's no
No,
more
we're just
questions.
getting started.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where to go from here because.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
But you go
Uh,
practice this for a while. Let's hear some
right.
results based upon what we're talking about. You begin to look at the thoughts and recognize that the number
Right.
one right effort is to change the thoughts from unwholesome to wholesome thoughts until you're really convinced that that's really the job that you need to do right now. Why? Because you've
Right.
already developed some of the other skills. Let's go get the one that you're missing.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me.
All right. So we'll see you in a couple of days or 3 or 4 or something.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see you later, James.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Excellent.
Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.